Welcome back to Virtual School Assembly. I'm your host, Natalie Christensen. And for today's episode, I'm bringing in a very special guest. This is our 25th episode. It marks 2 months that we're home with COVID-19, learning from home. And today's actually Mother's Day. So I decided to break out the big guns and made a big ask. I asked my all-time favorite person in the whole world, someone I admire more than anyone else. You know, when people ask you if you could have lunch with any 3 people, living or dead, this person's always at the top of my list. And I was really nervous about approaching her because she doesn't normally do public speaking. But of all the people who have done amazing things over the last 2 months, who have made the most of this pandemic, who have started new initiatives, reached out to others, encouraged others, I just kept thinking about the same person over and over again. And so I decided to take a little bit of courage and ask her to be on the show. And I'm very pleased to introduce my wife, Natalie. All right, welcome back to Virtual School Assembly. Today our guest is Natalie Christensen. Natalie graduated from Brigham Young University with a degree in marriage, family, and human development. After raising her own 4 children, Natalie pursued her passion to strengthen home and family within the community. She has worked as a disability and behavior coordinator, a behavior coach, a family advocate, and a community education coordinator. When Natalie isn't creating courses, she can be found gardening, cooking, or wielding a power tool. Welcome to the show, Natalie.
Thank you, Tyler. It's good to be here. Yes, today I wanted to talk about there being a time to every season. And the reason for that is as we have all started staying home and learning our new normal, the song started going through my head, and it came out in 1965, which was before even I was born, which I know may be surprising, but I bet all of you know it. The song goes, "To everything, turn, turn, turn." You could even sing along to it, right? And it ends with, "And a time to every purpose under heaven." And that kept coming back to me because there is a time when we're feeling sad and we just want to sit on the couch and cry and binge watch Netflix and binge playing video games and eat ice cream. And that's okay. There is a time to feel those emotions. And then there's also a time to get up and start moving out in the sunshine and laugh again. And today I will be sharing with you 4 ways on how to deal with stress and be able to move through those different times and seasons in our life. Now, when we're binge watching Netflix and wanting to just cry, which is normal, our bodies are often feeling a bit of stress, right? Or maybe even a lot of stress. When we feel stress, there's actually a chemical that is released into our brains that creates physical responses. And this chemical is called cortisol. It is the emotion chemical behind the fight or flight instinct. And its whole purpose is to get us to survive. What it does is it pulls blood from the brain, our frontal cortex, and from our stomach, our digestive tracts, and it puts us into our muscles and into the survival part of the back of our brain. The back of our brain is where it takes care of breathing, our heart pumping, things like that. And the front of our brain, the frontal cortex, is the reasoning and the thinking, the learning part of our brain. If we're under lots of stress or constant stress, every time that cortisol is dumped into our body, the front of our brain goes offline, and it's the back of our brain that is developed more. So it is important and vital that we learn these different ways of dealing with stress so that we can have the front of our brain online more often and also keep that frontal cortex continuing to develop. Now, fight or flight is not bad, right? There was a day and age where we needed to run from a saber-toothed tiger or fight somebody for our food, and we needed that to survive. We wouldn't be around as a species if we didn't have cortisol. But more common in our day and age, when we feel that stress hormone released, it is more likely because somebody sent us a mean text, we got in a fight with our mom or our dad, we didn't get to sit by the right person at lunch. There's lots of different things, right, that can cause that stress. But we're not having to run away from anyone. We're not having to fight anyone. And what's physically happening is that cortisol is staying in our body. Now, eventually our body will work that out and it'll get it out of our body. But if we're feeling constant stress and constantly having cortisol dumped into our body, it actually just sits there. It never has a chance to get out. But there are things we can do to get that out of our body. And we want to get it out. If we don't get it out, it can actually lead to higher levels of anxiety and depression. And they found in research that people who have large, long periods of depression and anxiety have higher levels of cortisol in their body. So we know that those things are released and linked together. But there are also things that we can do to make that better. And I'm going to go over those in a minute. First of all, I wanted to also point out that when we are feeling stress, sometimes it might seem unfair, or it might seem that there is no purpose behind us feeling stress or feeling pushed beyond our limits. I often like to think of the analogy of a spotter, who is someone that when someone is bench pressing, lifting weights, the spotter is meant to catch the bar when the weightlifter has maxed out, meaning their muscles can't go any further. They have pushed and lifted as much as they can. Now, the purpose behind this is not so the spotter can then laugh at the weightlifter for not being able to lift more, right? It's not so they can rub it in their face and say, I can do twice as much as you. The purpose of the spotter is to catch that weight when you max out so that you can see how far you can go. So while we're going through stressful situations, remind yourself, this is an opportunity for me to see how much I can lift and how strong I am. If we didn't ever go through hard things, we would never know how strong we were. And it is a valuable thing to learn. But we also need to know what we can do when that stress is constant. And in an unsure world like we have right now, we want normal. We just don't know where normal is or when it's going to get back. There are things we can do right now to help control that cortisol and bring the levels down so that they're not constantly in our body and then start causing anxiety or depression or adding to our anxiety and our depression. The first one you can do is breathe. Now, sometimes, like in the movies, or you might even hear yourself saying it to your younger sibling, if they get upset, just breathe, just breathe. And at first you might think they're trying to change the subject, they don't want to deal with reality, they're trying to make it downplay my emotions by telling me to breathe. But there's actually a scientific reason behind why we breathe. What happens is when we get large amounts of oxygen into our body, it helps our brain go back online. So in the back of our brain, we're feeling stress, it goes into survival mode, fight or flight, right? When we breathe, it helps bring oxygen-rich blood back into our brain and helps get our frontal cortex moving again. The reason that's important is because then we can make better decisions. Instead of just reacting or being angry, we can stop and breathe, get that frontal cortex going, and make wise decisions that we'll want to stand behind instead of being embarrassed of. One of the ways you can do this, and you don't have to do it if you're in class or something, you don't have to do it, or in front of your family, you could just breathe, right? But a little visualization can sometimes help. This is called hot chocolate breathing. And what you do is you just imagine that you're holding a warm, hot cup of hot cocoa or soup or mint tea, whatever you like drinking that needs to be cooled off, right? What you do is you breathe in and you hold it, and then you let go as if you're cooling off your hot cocoa. Now, what that does, every step of that, this is to help you remember the steps, right? But there's a reason behind why we hold it, as if you're enjoying the smell, right? And letting go. When you take that deep breath in and hold it, it gives your blood more time to fill up with all that oxygen and get it to your brain. You can do that 5 to 10 times, depending on how much you need, until you feel like reasoning is coming back to your brain, right? And that helps tremendously. Just knowing why you're breathing or why you're asking someone else to breathe really helps. You can even tell younger kids, like if you're trying to teach them the breathing, look, this is why. When you breathe, it just helps your brain to be able to make decisions again and make good decisions. So you'll have to decide what explanation worked better for your child, but I do recommend telling them, this is why we're doing it. The next thing is to move. Like cortisol put us in the perfect position to fight or to run, but if we don't, it just sits there. So move. If you are feeling stress, if you are feeling that pressure in your chest, or not being able to concentrate on things that you enjoy, those are good signs that your body is full of cortisol. So move to get your blood pumping, to get that out. You can do it by walking, by running, riding your bike, working in the garden, something that is causing your muscles to have to work. And it really does help. And on top of that, you can breathe, and that is going to be helping as well. The third one is to serve. And this may sound kind of counterintuitive, or how would that really help? But when you take the opportunity to make good happen and serve, you're able to take a break from worrying about your own problems. And that is one of the best things you can do, is to let your brain not have to keep worrying about something it might not be able to change, right? So take an opportunity to serve someone else. And the last step of being able to reduce stress in your life is to create anticipation. Anticipation is useful because it gives you something to look forward to. We know that more than anybody, or just as much as anybody really. When we all came home, March 15th is when it happened for us. Suddenly our calendar that had been really full, perhaps too full, was suddenly empty. There was nothing on our calendar. And, but we had discovered, thankfully, the importance of anticipation. And so when we pulled out our calendar, we saw there was nothing. And so instead we said, guys, there's nothing on our calendar. We should plan something to do. And they were simple things, right? Like, we're going to have a movie party. We're going to start watching the Avengers. We're going to do an Avengers themed movie every night, or this last week of school, we had a Star Wars day, and it didn't take a lot. I went and got the costumes downstairs, and the kids all dressed up in Star Wars. And thankfully, our school was doing a drive-by Star Wars parade, and it helped immensely to just have something to look forward to. And then we watched a Star Wars movie that night. Or the last day of school, we made a coronavirus piñata, and then we smashed it, because who doesn't hate the coronavirus, right? Sometimes we just need to smash it. But it was the anticipation of something happening. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be ice cream sundaes. It could be the kids' favorite movie. But talk about it earlier in the week. Write it down so you have something on your calendar, and anticipate it. Just anticipating something fun happening brings the opposite of cortisol. It brings all those happy emotions. It brings all the things that we hope will be happening, and creates good feelings inside. So those are my 4 takeaways: to breathe, to move, serve, and anticipate. Create anticipation. And remember, there is a time for every season. There's a time to cry, and there's a time to laugh. And just decide yourself where you're at.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalie. Those are some great suggestions. I love hearing you talk about them, because I've experienced this firsthand as I've seen you enact these in your life. I want to go back and touch on on each of these points. So you started with breathing. Now, breathing isn't something that we typically do socially. Some people have a meditation routine. Other people pray. Some people do your hot cocoa thing. And it's nice to know the science behind it, why that actually works and has proven to reduce anxiety. When do you like, when you're find yourself getting all excited about something, do you like, okay, I got to do hot cocoa now? Or how do you build breathing into your regular routine?
Yeah, the hot cocoa thing is actually more as a visualization, so you can remember what you're doing. I actually don't pull out hot cocoa and breathe, but I have seen it work for some of the kids I've worked with. What I like to do is I like to go walking, and I try to breathe while I'm doing it. Or there have been times where I can tell, you can even feel your heart starting to pump harder as you're feeling stressed, right? And I have just sat there and tried to take in a deep breath, because I know scientifically, I know that my body needs that oxygen. And so that's what I do.
Right. It was interesting. We watched The Incredible Hulk this week, and there's a scene on that where he has a coach that is teaching him how to calm down, because if his heart rate goes too high, he turns into the Hulk or whatever. And so he teaches him how to breathe. He has a coach that shows him how to breathe and to reduce his heart rate. And for him, it's doing exactly what you talked about. The science is there that it helps you alleviate some stress and anxiety. The heart rate is also connected to those cortisol levels. And so if the Hulk needs to breathe, I guess we do too, right?
Right, exactly.
All
It
right.
helps control the mini Hulk inside of us.
Perfect. Now, you talked about exercise and moving. That's a hard thing for a lot of people to do right now. If you have an exercise routine where perhaps you go to the gym or you play organized sports with your school or things like that, well, all those things are canceled, right? And so you don't have the same opportunities to do that. What are you doing personally, or what are you doing with your children to build exercise into your routine?
That is a great question. We knew when we all came home that we were going to experience this, because thankfully, we'd done research. We knew the cortisol, we knew sitting would increase those stress feelings in our bodies. And so we put as a part of our schedule to do Just Dance, which is a Wii game. And we did that every day. We actually scheduled it on our calendar. And the whole purpose was to get our blood pumping. We also go on walks. We encourage our kids to go on bike rides. And we started doing a lot of backyard projects that really helped. We were out in the sun. We were moving. We were lifting. We were working, which really helped. I know not everyone has the same situation. You may not even have a backyard that you can be improving, or maybe not even necessarily a safe place to walk. There are also several free exercise programs on YouTube, or many rec centers are doing free programs right now online. I would encourage you to take advantage of something that works for your lifestyle, that makes you look forward to moving.
Awesome. Now, a couple things you didn't mention, but I know we do it, and so I want to mention it. One thing is, I love to play really loud, obnoxious music and do push-ups and sit-ups and jumping jacks with the kids. And when we do that together, they love it. So we'll crank AC/DC or Guns N' Roses or something, and we'll just do push-ups. And even our little 6-year-old, she'll brag about how many push-ups she's doing. They're not really push-ups, but she's moving, and that's a good way to start the day. Also, probably more than any other activity during this time, our kids love going out and jumping on the trampoline together. If they're jumping by themselves just for that exercise, that's great. But introducing that social component where they want to jump with dad or with mom or with each other, that's a great way to get exercise and get that cortisol out of you. But it's also a good social opportunity. So that's been cool to see. Your third point was service. And you talked about how important it can be to serve during this time, because when you're not thinking about yourself, that reduces anxiety and depression. But I think now's a hard time to serve, because we are kind of thinking about ourselves. We're in survival mode, and we're just not out and about as much. So we're not seeing our neighbors. We're not out in our community or with our churches or whatever. So do you have any ideas for what we can be doing right now to reach out to others and to serve?
Yes, I do. I know it is very counterintuitive. You have to actively decide to go against what you're feeling inside. But just think, what I'm feeling is cortisol, and I need to get that out of my body, and this is going to help. So there are a couple of ways. There's one website called justserve.org that has several things that you can actually do at home to serve other people. Also, I'm the SU community education coordinator, and we actually, when COVID hit and we all got sent home, we actually created 3 mini series, all free to the community, and we asked people to volunteer their knowledge and their expertise. And we had so many people come forward and want to help. That is an opportunity to serve. And the whole purpose was to increase the good in other people's lives. Oh, sorry. I also have a few. I was going to stop right there. There's more. You can help your neighbors too. If you have an elderly neighbor, bring in their garbage can. If they, it's probably a little harder for them to pick those weeds at the front of their yard, bend down and pick some of the weeds that might be harder for them to get. Look for opportunities to help somebody that might be having a little bit harder time than you, or struggling in a way that you don't struggle, and you can help.
Awesome. Great suggestions. Thanks. The last point that you talked about in your presentation was this idea of anticipation. And I know that as a family, we kind of learned this lesson through Disneyland, right? So
Right.
can you talk about how we learned through Disneyland how to anticipate things, and what parents can be doing now to set up anticipation for their children?
Yes. So we were new parents, and you learn, like, that's what parenting is, right? You learn as you go. Our kids were young, like, I don't know, 5 and 3, I think. Um, and we wanted to surprise them with Disneyland. And we decided we were just going to show up there, not even tell them what was going on, just show up. And we just thought this will be incredibly exciting. And I mean, they were like, oh, huh. But they weren't like exploding with excitement like we thought they would be. And I didn't really know why until, I read an article about it somewhere else about anticipation. And they pointed out that sometimes, or often, the joy we feel in an experience is mostly contained within the journey to that. Like, you can take Christmas, for example. Christmas is so exciting because we do so many things building up to that, right? We put up the Christmas tree. We get to make gingerbread houses. Whatever your family traditions are, it doesn't all happen on one day. It's the anticipation of that day. And you can do that. Like, if we had done that, we actually, the second time we went to Disneyland, we did that. We did the exact opposite, and we told them about it, and we printed tickets so they could hold them, and we put it on the calendar with a big star. And they were so much more excited by the time the day came, because the excitement grew each day, and we built the anticipation on purpose.
Yeah.
So
And they knew who Mickey Mouse was.
And they knew who Mickey Mouse was by that point. Exactly.
Yeah, that was important. I think that's important. And I've seen this certainly with our own children over the last 2 months. I think as I look back at what has happened since we've come home, and we've been working from home and supporting our children in their learning from home. And quite honestly, it's been 2 of the best months of my life. I think our kids have grown and developed in so many ways. And I think a big part of that is the anticipation that we put things on the calendar, and it's small things. We went to a petting zoo yesterday where we were the only people there, so social distancing wasn't an issue. But the kids had that to look forward to and to think about, and I think that makes a big difference. Um, just on that point, that this has been an incredible experience for you and I, even though we've been working harder than ever before. We're super busy with different things, but it's been fulfilling, and we've seen our children learn and grow. Um, what can other people be doing so that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, they can look back and say, COVID-19 was the best thing that ever happened to me. It's a time, it was a turning point. It was a time when we learned and grew and developed new skills. What can people do to make this a really remarkable and memorable time?
That is a really good thought and question. I know that, like, we're all saying we're in this together, and we are all experiencing this together. But the truth is we're all experiencing it from different perspectives. And we may find perhaps it's through these trials or stress in our life where certain things are pointed out that we didn't realize needed time or attention, right? And part of one of the mini series we created was actually navigating at home in close quarters, and the whole purpose of that was to help increase relationships within the home. While we're at home, those things we're going to experience more friction. We're experiencing more friction because we're all around each other more. But there are things that you can do. And like I know one of the things that we've done, and we did this years before, but I found it to really be a benefit in our life now, is that we have regularly taught our children how to resolve conflict with each other. The goal being that we didn't want our kids to grow up thinking that's just what you do. You fight and scream with your siblings. That's life. I know it is common, but we wanted home to be a place where they loved to return to. And so one of the ways we did that is when our kids are fighting or are having a disagreement, and they do, like it's not like we have kids that never disagree with each other or never have hurt feelings. But one of the things we try to do to help them so that they have that for the future is we give them skills on how to resolve that conflict. So just today, we put up new hammocks today on one of our backyard projects. Well, we put it up this last week as one of our backyard projects. But then today, one of our kids came in and so-and-so's not letting me sit in the hammock with them, and the other person's not letting me take a turn. And so we just talked with them. We're like, oh yeah, that must not feel good. That doesn't feel good to be left out. Did you ask them if you could have a turn? And well, no, I didn't, or I did, or he had several answers. But so we said, well, how about you suggest that you have a turn in 2 minutes and take a timer out with you, and you guys can have a turn in 2 minutes. And so it's just an example of giving your kids just little tidbits of ways to resolve conflict on their own, not so that you can not be involved or so that you can keep playing on the computer. I'm not saying that you don't need to be a parent, but actually by giving kids these little bits of resolving conflict on their own, it empowers them, and it helps them to be prepared for when they are an adult one day.
Yeah, I know that works because I've observed, in fact, just yesterday, I woke up and I thought, this is how I want to wake up every day, because our kids were cooking omelets for each other for breakfast when we got out of bed, not for a special occasion or anything. They were just making breakfast. And then this morning as we got up, they were out playing in the hammocks, and they don't need us to tell them to do every part of their life because they've learned how to be independent, how to resolve conflict. And they're taking that initiative. They're doing their own projects. Our older son is building a vending machine, and our daughter has her own little garden, and they're just doing really cool things. So it certainly works, but it doesn't happen overnight. This is our years in progress. Your whole message was there's a time and a season for everything. And I think it's important to recognize that we can make the most of this situation right now. But this is a time that if it's not going well, it's going to pass, and we're going to move past this, and it's going to be better. I appreciate you coming on today, Natalie, and sharing your advice with us, these ways of dealing with stress and anxiety. Certainly in the description to this video, I'll link to your community education stuff because there are a lot of great free resources there, so we'll do that. Well, Natalie, thanks for joining us this morning on this special episode. This is episode 25, and it's on Mother's Day, and I just want to personally thank you for being such an incredible mother, for working so hard with your children. They are amazing kids, and that's mostly because they have an amazing mother. I should also throw a shout out to my own mom on here. I grew up with an angel mother who did so much for me, and Mom, I really love you and appreciate you. Thanks for all that you taught me. Well, Natalie, if people want to learn more about you and follow what you're doing, where should they go?
Yes, I actually have a website called thishomadehome.com, and I write about everything that I love. So I have recipes, I have gardening, I have DIY projects and, processes on how to build a bench and all kinds of things. But I also talk about articles on social emotional health and mental health, ways to deal with stress. So stop on by. And remember, there's a time for every season.